Oh, good to see you. Just up the road, about 10-minute drive, there's Mandroy Falls. It's incredible. Let's get some fruit and check it out. All right, rock and roll. This hill, we'll head into the rainforest. Wooranoora National Park. Yeah, mate, it's amazing. All right, team, let's do it. Easy, mate. How's that for a root? Like, feel that, how strong that is.
Fellow councillors, staff and residents viewing via live stream, good morning all and welcome. I acknowledge the traditional owners and caretakers of the land on which this meeting is being held and pay my respect to the elders past, present and emerging. Councillors, do we have any apologies? Take that as a no. We move on to the declaration of conflict of interest. Councillors and staff, declaration of prescribed conflicts of interest or declarable conflicts of interest. Please use this opportunity to make public any prescribed conflict of interest or declarable conflicts of interest in respect of the items in the agenda. Councillors should use this opportunity to disclose and or comment on other councillors and or staff interests in accordance with the Act and the regulations. Councillors, do we have any conflicts to declare? Councillor Pervin.
Mr Mayor, yes, in item 8.1 of the confidential report, I've got a conflict of interest in the COVID-19 financial hardship policy, so I'll leave the room at this stage.
Yeah, and through you, Mr Mayor, Councillor Pervin has sent me written advice of that in accordance with the Act.
Thanks, Mr CEO. Okay, we'll move on to item 1, confirmation of the minutes. Item 1.1, local government meeting dated 21st of January. Would somebody move that they're a true and accurate record, please? Moved by Councillor Chewy, seconded by Councillor Pervin. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Councillors, is there any business arising from the previous minutes? Councillor Pervin.
Yes, through you, Mr Mayor. After the meeting, myself, in relation to the Autofest in Innisfail, myself and Councillor Farinelli attended an Aerodrome Users Group meeting. We had constructive conversations with the Aerodrome User Group in relation to the Autofest performance to be held in August this year. The feedback from the group was very positive, and they hope that it can go ahead, and they wish to be kept updated and informed throughout the organising of the event.
Thanks, Councillor Pervin. Any further business arising from the minutes? I'd like to go to page 14, Mr CEO. Could you give us an update on the appeal process after the MCU approval for the helipad at Mission Beach?
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. The legislation provides that after the decision is made by Council, the applicant has a 20 business day period within which it can appeal or seek to vary the decision. In this particular case, the applicant has waived its right to appeal, which means that a further 20 business days is now available, was available, is currently available for the submitters to make an appeal. I don't know the exact date that those 20 business days conclude, but when Mr. Jones is in the room, I'll be able to supply that date to you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Mr. CEO. Any further business arising from the minutes? If not, we'll move on to item 3.1, major projects, Port Hinchinbrook Sewerage Proposal, and Mr. Bradford will present this report.
Morning.
Morning.
Morning, councillors. Morning, Mr. Bradford. And everybody else. This morning, the report I've brought to you this morning is previously council under an agreement with the Department of State Development, Tourism and Innovation, and the consent with the liquidators for the passage holdings at Port Hinchinbrook. Council's been operating and maintaining the sewage treatment plant for the Port Hinchinbrook estate since 2018. The infrastructure remains the property of the passage holdings, but we've got some challenges around the funding that has been previously provided for that agreement from the state expired in August 2020. So the current plant is in quite poor condition, and what it has resulted in is that council has to spend over and above what the funding was allowing up during the last period, and saw us spend an extra $38,000 during the 2019-20 year. In the 2020-21 financial year, council's currently expended $76,700 in maintaining and operating that treatment plant. Officers have requested advice and comment from the department to see if the funding will be extended to include this financial year. At this point, we haven't had a response. So from here, the options council officers are recommending council consider is to continue the current arrangement. Option 1 is to continue the current arrangement of operating and maintain the sewage treatment plant. This would see the wider community continuing to fund the sewage treatment for Port Hinchinbrook Estate. This would be quite different to any other sewage scheme that is operated by this council and most others. Some of this would continue to see added pressure on our current general budget, and it is also identified as a budget risk. If this option is selected, officers recommend that immediate engagement with the liquidator is conducted to alleviate any potential tenure issues. Also, option 2, the current arrangement is to continue only if we're able to source external funding for the operation and maintenance of the sewage treatment plant at Port Hinchinbrook. This will alleviate any pressures with the budget issue, but we'll still have to resolve the potential tenure issues. Option 3 is to cease the current operation and maintenance of the treatment plant at a future date. This will allow us a short period for external bodies such as the company to arrange appropriate service for that to continue at the treatment plant. This will cease any impact on the wider community paying for the rates, paying for the operation of that sewage scheme, and also alleviate any potential tenure issues. Some of the things, some of the risks associated with continuing the operation of the maintenance of the treatment plant is the legal tenure that council has to be there at the moment. We have some questions about that, and they will need to be resolved if we're to continue. Also, the current environmental compliance issues with the current state of the treatment plant, potentially not meeting those requirements under the Environmental Authority. The risk of substantial outlay if we're to continue. The plant is in quite poor condition, so if we continue to operate it in the short term, there is a possibility that pump stations and other associated infrastructure could fail, and additional outlay would have to be required. And whether that would be funded by us or by the external source would have to be resolved. Also, council staff that have been operating the treatment plant for some time, I don't think it was intended at the time when it commenced for it to last this long, so those staff have been stretched to maintain service levels across our other treatment plants as well. On the flip side of not continuing to operate the treatment plant down there, is the potential lack of appropriate ongoing management of that sewage treatment scheme, and we end up in a similar situation with potential wider environmental issues to such assets as the Great Barrier Reef, and also the political risk around inaction on a failed private estate on our doorstep to the Cassowary coast. So, Council, the recommendation in front of you today is to select one of those options for the ongoing operation of the sewage treatment plant at Port Hinchinbrook Estate. Option 1, to continue to provide the service with general ratepayer funds. Option 2, to continue to provide the service with externally sourced funds. And option 3 is to cease the operation at a future date. Also, point 2 is that officers recommend that Council continue to try and facilitate a long-term solution at Port Hinchinbrook.
Thank you, Mr Bradford. Councillors, before we discuss the recommendation, the CEO has received a call and he wants to share that information with us.
Yes, with your indulgence, Mr Chairman, letters just been received which may be relevant to this matter. I've not had time, nor anybody else had time to read it yet, so I wonder if I could request that Council might defer consideration of this matter until later in the meeting or another time, so that we have an opportunity to see what's in that letter and potentially contact the state.
Thanks, Mr CEO. Would somebody move that we defer, please? Moved by Councillor Millwood, seconded by Councillor Barnes. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you.
And through you, Mr Mayor, may I be excused to go and have a
Absolutely, yep.
look at it? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Bradford. We now move on to item 4, Governance, Environment and Finance. 4.1, New Policy, Closed Circuit Television Policy. And Ms Morgan will present this report.
Morning, councillors.
Morning, Ms Morgan.
I don't know how loud to speak. So this report before you is for the adoption of a new policy. The policy is called the Closed Circuit Television or CCTV policy. So council currently has about 150 cameras throughout our region, and these provide a fundamental service in improving our safety, reducing crime, and to assist our law enforcement agencies in their duties. With these systems increasingly expanding, we've identified a need to adopt a policy to govern how we establish and operate these systems and the subsequent manage of the associated data, particularly in ensuring our compliance with the Information Privacy Act and how we handle the request for and the release of footage. The recommendation here is that Council adopt the closed circuit television policy.
Thank you, Ms Morgan. Councillors, any comment on that report? Somebody move the recommendation.
Sorry.
Moved by Councillor Farinelli, seconded by Councillor Pervin. You want to speak, Mr. Councillor Pervin?
I'll just start. Yeah, I'll ask a question once you're finished.
Okay.
Ms Morgan, just in relation to the CCTV in Innisfail, roughly how many? In the region, how many CCTV cameras are currently around?
So we have about 64 in Innisfail at the moment, and we've got 40 in Tully, and then we've got some standalone systems at more remote facilities as well, which is probably about in the range of 50 spread out throughout the region.
And we'll have an increase in those numbers in time to come?
The anticipation is we will continue to increase the systems, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pervin. We've got a mover and a seconder. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Just further to that item, the Superintendent of Innisfail Police Station has kindly invited councillors and key staff to visit the police station, to go into the centre where all the images are captured in the police station precinct, to get a better understanding of how CCTV works across our region. So, how you going, Mr. Singh? Mr. Gott will organise that meeting in due course, and we'll definitely accept that kind offer from the police station. Thank you, Ms Morgan.
Thank you.
Okay, we now move on to item 4.2. The quarterly progress report, and this will be presented by Ms Kerr.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Morning, Ms Kerr.
Hello. You have in your agenda today the second quarterly report for our 2021 operational plan. All statuses and comments have been updated by all departments. So just if there's any questions in relation to any particular KPIs in that report.
Councillors, any questions for the officer on that report? If not, would somebody move the recommendation, please? Moved by Councillor Baines, seconded by Councillor Millwood. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you, Ms Kerr. Item 4.3, the financial report, and Ms Bradley will present this report.
Good morning, councillors. So this morning we have in front of you our finance report and our monthly council reporting package for the period up until the 31st of January 21. Our operational revenues currently sitting at 85.9 million, which is 37.2 million over budget in comparison to our year-to-date budget of 48.7. Operational expenditures sitting at 53.6 million, which is 3 million under budget year-to-date in comparison with the $56.6 million budget. Our end-of-month cash balance was at 33.6 million. Capital expenditure for the month totaled 1.6 million, and year-to-date capital expenditure, including commitments, totals 30.9 million, which is 38% in comparison to our full-year budget excluding commitments, or 52% including commitments. Page 2 of the report presents our measures of financial sustainability up until the end of January also. Our operating surplus ratio is currently sitting at 37.5%, our asset sustainability ratio at 104%, and our net financials liability ratio sitting at minus 65.89%. And I'll explain a bit more as we progress why the operating surplus ratio is higher than the targeted range. So the summary of financial results on the next page gives us the details of where those variances are sitting. As you'll see, note number 1 is our net rates and utility charges, which is currently tracking 36.8 million over budget. This is just to do with the timing of the January rates run and when that journal was posted and recognised in the system. Fees and charges are currently tracking 169,000 over budget. This is due to increased rate searches, animal registrations and building inspections undertaken year to date. Interest, as we're aware, is currently tracking under budget by 222,000. The RBA's maintained their 0.1% cash rate last week, which is expected but unfortunate, so the interest rates are expected to continue to be pretty dismal. Operating grants is currently tracking 285,000 ahead of budget, due to the timing of Works for Queensland funding that's been received, as well as the Coastal Adaptation Strategic Plan. Sales and recoverable works currently 344,000 over budget, so this is the timing and the receipt of the main road works that's being undertaken. Employee expenses are currently under budget by 1.6 million due to vacant positions and the timing of the payroll posting. Materials and services are currently 1.17 million under budget, mainly relating to timing of invoices for some of our waste facilities, electricity, telecommunications, as well as reduced fuel costs. Excuse me. Capital grants are 4.6 million over budget, with our NDRRA funding having been received, as well as the final claim for the Tully Grandstand. And our gain and our loss on asset disposals, our loss on disposals is currently tracking under budget by 1.8. However, this is a reflection of our sale of fleet items as well as the timing and completion of capital works when those assets are disposed. The investment performance for the month, with the 33.6 million council had in the bank, we had 38% of that invested at 0.6%, almost 30% in a term deposit at 0.8%, and our QTC on call at 0.55%, and we have just invested an additional 5 million this week at 0.7% for 5 months, which is the best rate that we can get at this point in time. Capital projects, so as you're aware, Council's full year capital budget sitting at 58.9 million. Capital expenditure to date at 22.3, with year-to-date commitment sitting at 8.6. So we've been reviewing our projects as part of the budget review and what we can and can't deliver. So we'll be putting that to Council at the next CIS to discuss the budget review moving forward for adoption. Budget risks are much the same as they have been tracking throughout the year, with our asset rationalisation, our interest on investments, our work cover insurance, our Port Hinchinbrook dredging study, as well as our waste transfer station project, and depreciation also is something we'll be looking at in the budget review in more detail. Happy to take any questions there might be on the report.
Any questions for the officers, councillors? Ms Bradley, can I take you back to page 190? You mentioned that you'd explain later why the ratio is greater than the target.
Yes,
Please.
thank you, Mayor. The operating surplus ratio is currently sitting at 38%. This is because of the advance receipt of our rates that have been run in January, because we've recognised that revenue. It tends to blow out at this point in time, and then will spread evenly out with the remaining 5 months.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Not a problem.
Any further comments or questions, councillors? If not, would somebody move that the report be received and noted? Moved by Councillor Baines, seconded by Councillor Barnes. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ms Bradley. We move on to item 4.4, policy review, and Ms Slattery will present this report.
Good morning. Good morning, Mr Mayor. Good morning, councillors. Today we've got two policies for your review and consideration. The first policy is the Council Code of Conduct. This policy has been updated to reflect recent changes to the local government legislation, in particular the definitions around conflict of interest. The second policy is the guidelines to submitting a petition to council. So a couple of meetings ago we updated our council meeting standing orders and procedures, and now we've updated, and there's a section on petitions in that particular policy, and now we've reflected that through this petition policy. So track changes are included in your pack. Recommendation is to adopt those two policies.
Thank you, Ms Slattery. Any questions for the officer? Councillor Chewy.
Thank you, Ms Slattery. Just a question. I was asked the other week by a constituent that they wanted to start a petition, but they had understood that previous petitions had not been recognised by council. Is there somewhere on the website, or if they ring us up, will they get advice on the correct procedure to present a petition that will be officially recognised? Thank you.
Yeah. So in this guideline is actually how to prepare a petition, and it also actually has some guidelines in there in terms of how it's presented to council, and then how we actually communicate to the people. So that, and this goes on the website, correct? Yep. So it's available to the public.
Any further questions? If not, somebody move the report, please. Moved by Councillor Chewy, seconded by Councillor Baines. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we move on to item 5.1, Building Better Regions, round 5, and Mr Goodman's going to present this report. Mr Goodman.
Mr Mayor, councillors. Councillors, this report is provided to you seeking your endorsement to apply for Building Better Regions funding from the federal government for the specific project of the Mission Beach CBD upgrade. The Australian government has recently announced round 5 of its Building Better Regions fund. The round provides $100 million of dedicated funding for tourism-related infrastructure. It also provides a further $100 million for general infrastructure in regional and remote areas of Australia. So a total of $200 million Australia-wide. It's a lot of money, but if you consider the number of projects that are likely nominated for it, I have no doubt it will be significantly oversubscribed. So we have looked to projects that best meet both council's needs and also fit the criteria for the funding itself. We think this project will fit neatly into the tourism-related as a tourism-related infrastructure project, where there is, as I have previously stated, there's $100 million available. and we need to, as part of that, demonstrate the impact of. Yeah, and I'm sure it's noted in the minutes, Mr. Gott. Sorry, councillors. As part of if council endorses the recommendation to you, we would need to demonstrate the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the region's tourism industry, and that the region will benefit from the proposed project. Further need to demonstrate how the project benefits to the tourism industry to assist in mitigating the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. Clearly, we have been advised up front that we need to provide evidence to support our claims, and must, of course, meet the eligibility requirements. The councillors, the Mission Beach CBD upgrade is part of Council's adopted master plan for Mission Beach, but also it is one of the key drivers for this project is the underwater stormwater in that vicinity, which is getting relatively close to the end of its useful life, and the risk of that infrastructure is increasing. We have applied a number of times for funding for this project, and have yet been unsuccessful. So happy to take any questions, councillors, but the recommendation is that the council apply for funding on round 5 of the Building Better Regions Fund for the Mission Beach CBD upgrade project. I should have said that it was this funding is based on maximum of 50%. The total project value there is close to $10 million. But we will, of course, as we try to be try to see what other funding is available to match the to match that. If council has been successful in a couple of major projects in recent years, getting both state and federal government funding, and I just want to point out too that this project is identified in your adopted asset management plans, particularly those stormwater components, as a project that needs to be delivered in the short term.
Thank you, Mr. Goodman. Any questions, Councillor Farinelli?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Goodman. So, $10 million total project cost. So, just looking at the recommendation, there is a chance that council, if we can't seek the other 50% funding, we could be up for $5 million from our own budget, if we were to. Is that correct?
That is correct, yeah.
Okay, so, I mean, I think it's really important that we do go ahead with this, but I mean, it's just a lot of money. So would that be something we probably look at borrowing for, or?
Through the chair, those projects have largely been built into our asset management plans and are accounted for in our long-term financial plan.
Okay.
And so no, those it would not be an extraordinary project that if we were not successful in getting funding for the other 50%, that we would need to be seeking loans for. And
Okay.
I've just got the thumbs up from the back there from the CFO,
Okay.
so I'm
Okay,
comfortable with that
for me,
advice.
it's just, through you again, Mr. Mayor, I just, very aware of how we've tried to keep spending under wraps quite, and we're dealing with asset rationalisation and everything. I just want to make sure that it's not going to put a large strain on our future budget deliberations for this project.
Councillor Barnes.
Oh yes, good. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to confirm more what Mr. Goodman's saying. That was flagged 15 years ago, that damage with the stormwater pipes. If they blow out, you're going to end up with a swirl under all that CBD and have big sinkholes, aren't we? That was first flagged a long time ago, and it's been a long time coming. So I think it's pretty urgent myself.
It's through the chair. That is one of the risks that potentially could happen. We don't see that as a risk in the coming wet season. there is a potential that we don't see that as a high risk in the coming wet season, but certainly as every year goes, that risk increases, and it's something that we would advocate that as a risk that needs to be managed. I also would like to point out that in terms of certainly heard councillors' view and particularly the mayor's view on how we develop our budgets, and I think the words is renew before new, or something like that. This total project, while on the face of it, the infrastructure will give a very significant facelift to that area of Mission Beach. It will look very different. But around, we calculate around 70% of the total value of this project is just straight renewal of existing assets. And that stormwater component would be around 30% of that. So around 3 million of the 10 million is renewing that stormwater. So it is a project that fits neatly within Council's corporate objectives in asset management and making sure we're looking after our existing assets. But also it's one of those key tourism areas in our region, and I think we all have acknowledged in the past that it would be worthwhile a reasonable facelift in that area.
Thanks, Mr. Goodman. Councillor Pervin.
Mr. Goodman, could you give us a timeline, how the timeline works there? We put in for the application. When do they usually get back to us in relation if you're successful or unsuccessful?
There is, through the chair, it is difficult to give you a timeline, and there will be, so they close on the 5th of March. I guess it is possible then that by May that we could have an offer, but it also to be 100% honest with you, that if there has been the cases in the past where governments have used these sorts of things, if there is a possibility of tying in with an election to delay announcing of significant funding packages to tie in closer to an election that might be announced. So that they will never give you a 100% guarantee that the successful projects will be announced before this day.
Thanks, Mr. Goodman. Sorry, can I just continue on, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, sure.
Just further to that, the purchase of the car park in previous council, that's all got to do with the overall master plan of the Mission Beach area, is that correct?
Through the chair, that is correct, and the $10 million, if we were successful, or the $10 million project, if we were to deliver it, would upgrade that car park to a modern standard as part of that project.
All right, thanks, Mr. Goodman.
Councillor Millwood.
Through the chair. So if and when we did start the Mission Beach master plan, would this be planned out in stages, or would it just include the whole master plan from way to go?
Through the chair, this does not include every aspect of the master plan. The master plan incorporated a wider area. This is an area that encompasses that key tourism precinct, and also encompasses the area where if we have to renew the stormwater and we destroy a whole lot of infrastructure above the ground, that we replace all of that. So clearly it does not cover 100% of the entire master planned adopted area.
Thank you, Mr. Goodman. Any further questions for the officer? If not, somebody move the recommendation, please. Moved by Councillor Chewy, seconded by Councillor Farinelli. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Goodman. We move on to item 5.2, the Bulgan Intake Water Reservoir, and Mr. Smart. Yeah, sure, mate. Mr. Smart will present this report. Welcome, Mr. Smart.
Morning, councillors. Morning, Mr. Smart.
Morning, Mr. Smart. How are you?
Great, thank you very much.
Precipitation adding water to your reservoirs?
Yes. Councillors, this is my final report on the Bulgan Intake Reservoir. The project was completed before Christmas and has been operational since then, but this is just an opportunity to, I I guess, close out the final expenditure and give a bit of a summary of how the report, how the reservoir worked during those wet events, and how we've sort of amended some of our operational projects, how we're managing our operations a bit better since the reservoir was put in place. As I said, the reservoir was completed before Christmas. We have had a significant number of weather events that would have otherwise put boil water alerts through much of Tully, the Tully scheme, and fortunately we have managed to avoid all of those, which is a great outcome. The total expenditure for the project was $3.263 million, which is fairly close to what our original budget estimates were. And I would like to recognise that the state government were a significant contributor towards the funding of this project. They contributed $1.901 $460, and without their contribution, that would have certainly made it a little bit more awkward for us in our funding. So their contribution is appreciated. We have still to complete the access road improvements. The wet weather did damage the access road a little bit more, and quite frankly we've been holding out until possibly the worst of the weather is passed before we start any of those improvement works. And at the moment there's about another $300,000 allocated to fix up the access road. In terms of the operational performance of the reservoir since it was commissioned, we have had some learnings. The control systems are working extremely well. There's still some manual intervention that's required depending on which intake goes out first or comes back online first. But really the analyzers are working well, the automated valving is working well, and the degree of manual intervention is very minimal. We have learnt through one of the very prolonged events that it's necessary for us to shut off both Hyatt Street and Wheatley Street and the Wheatley's Hill Reservoir fairly early in the event, because otherwise Bolgan, being higher, drains to those reservoirs, and it did drop it out pretty quickly, and that was a scary moment for us in one of the first events. But we're on top of that now, and we shut off the intakes to Wheatley's and Hyatt Street, and they supply their local regions, and the Bolgan supplies the Tully Township. So that's working quite sweetly now. We have also had an occasion where the Boulder Creek system cleaned up faster than the Bolgan was able to. So during that period, the reservoir was quite low, so we decided we would let Boulder feed the Tully region. We hadn't really anticipated that sort of event, so there was some manual intervention, opening valves, closing valves, to allow that to happen. We will automate that process in the coming months, so that's another part of the process that we'll work on. And we've also identified that we can probably reduce the pressure into the community by a further 20 metres with a pressure reducing valve somewhere near the Bolgan chlorinator, the old Bolgan chlorinator on Bolgan Road, and that will help with water leaks and burst mains. So that's also something that we'll be progressing over the next couple of months. There is an important message that the community needs to understand with these reservoirs, because we're solely relying on water storage, clean water storage in those reservoirs. If we have a period where the rainfall is intense and prolonged, they just go down and down and down, and unless the creeks clean up, we can't get water into them to recharge them. So the community just has to be aware that there has to be some sort of conservation of water message given to the community at those times. That like if it's just a quick storm, it's not going to be a problem. But with a cyclone event or something significant where the rain is hanging around for days and days and days and days, and it is extreme, those reservoirs will drop. The worst case scenario is we have to put them back on a boil water alert, but we don't want to do that. We would prefer they just considered their consumption, how they're using their water, so that will also be something that we'll watch going forward. If need be, we'll promote that message of conservation if there's likely to be a prolonged event. I suppose also I'd like to recognise the contribution of the staff and the contractors involved in these works. The water team staff were heavily involved with this, and a lot of it is our innovations and our designs, and I think they've done a really good job.
Thank you, Mr. Smart. Any comments, councillors? Councillor Millwood.
Mr. Smart, I know I've congratulated you on this before, but I again would like to say on behalf of the community, I think they're very excited that we, touch wood, haven't had any boil water alerts. And yes, I will put that message out there that even though we've got ample water around here, that the big message out there is to still be water-wise at all times. Yeah, thank you to you and your team.
Thank you.
Well done.
Any further questions or comments, councillors? I'd just like to echo Councillor Millwood's comments to yourself and the staff. When you came to us with the proposal, there were doubters, and I was one of them. If we'd got a boil of water alert in the last couple of weeks, today's message wouldn't have been so good. But it is a success story for this council, and we took the advice of the experts in the field, and credit to the state government for assisting as well. They changed the goalposts in relation to what good quality water is, so I think it was duty bound on them to contribute to help us get the technology in place to make sure we don't get boil water alerts and become a third world country and we can't give a decent potable water to our residents. So yeah, on behalf of council, thank you very much.
Hear, hear.
Somebody move the recommendation, please. Moved by Councillor Millwood, seconded by Councillor Baines. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. We move on to item 6.1, receipt of petitions, and a petition from Mrs. Dixon, and this will be presented by Mr. Hammond.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, morning. Mr. CEO and councillors.
Mr. Hammond.
Thank you. A petition was received by council, signed by 103 petitioners. The petition outlined that the council order to remove the public and bar table amenities installed in front of 17 Hargrave Street in Carramine Beach be withdrawn on the grounds that the amenities are valued and utilised by the local community and tourists alike, as well as positioned at the foot of the recently installed public step access to the beachfront from Hargrave Street, are well designed and constructed and are aesthetically a good fit for the environment in which they stand. That petition came to my department and our investigation outlined the following. We noted that we had 4 complaints previous to this petition about the construction of these furniture on the beach area. Our inspections revealed that the work was constructed on land under council control. The standard of the work that was constructed was certainly sufficient for private use, but did not fit the expectation of public place equipment. The location of the equipment was in an area that was potentially not seen as for the broader use of the community. And the equipment certainly had trip hazards and fall hazards, which we needed to further understand. We had no known application for the furniture, and the construction was of a standard that had not been approved or designed or approved by what we known as an engineering group. We also found that there was a breach of the local law for the construction of the material. Council needs to consider that the risk associated with this type of equipment on our land does possess and propose a risk that is something that we need to be very much aware of. And I'll bring to your attention a case where the Goondiwindi Regional Council and Tate, where the council lost a case where they did not fully consider the issue of risk. So I implore council to consider that when making this decision. We've looked at the design plans for similar furniture, and this particular type of furniture does not match that. It certainly is a sort of equipment that we may not necessarily have put, and if we were to put any furniture, it may not necessarily have been in the area where it's been placed. The recommendation that I make back to council is that we inform the principal petitioner that a council order to remove the picnic table amenities installed in front of 17 Hargrave Street, Curramine Beach, be maintained, and that the notice, which did expire on the 29th of January, be given an extension of time to have the furniture removed by Friday the 26th of February.
Thank you, Mr Hammond. Any questions, Councillor? Councillor Millwood.
Through the chair, I just wanted you to verify the steps that were put there. They were actually put there by council, were they?
The steps were put there by council.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Pervin.
Through you, Mr Mayor. In my opinion, I think the table and the bar set up on the beach foreshore looks very good and appealing to the public. As you've noted there, my concern lies with if council does allow this to go ahead, we will open ourselves up to liability if someone is injured. The Australian building standards for that sort of equipment hasn't been adhered to. I would like to see the council staff work with Ms Dixon to come up with a suitable and compliant construction. I think this could be an achievable outcome. A petition was received in relation to this equipment, and a lot of residents are in favour of it. So I really would like to see the council staff sit down with Ms Dixon and work out what could be achieved.
Thank you, Councillor Pervin. Over to you, Mr Hammond.
Thank you, and through the chair, we have worked with Mrs Dixon through this process and asked her to submit an application. We were comfortable and happy to help her with that application, but at the end, no application was received.
Okay, thanks, Mr Hammond.
Thank you.
Any further questions for the officer? Councillors, a risk has been identified, and in the eye of the law, ignorance is not an excuse, so there's no wriggle room here. It's a breach of the building standards, and publicly we've had complaints. Our staff have done the investigation. They've presented their report. We need to be careful how we address this matter in terms of liability issues. Would somebody move the recommendation, please?
Sorry, Mr Mayor. So will we be moving is there two separate motions there, one or two, or are we moving both together for the recommendation?
Both together, I believe. Both together.
Yeah, all right. I'll move the recommendation.
Moved by Councillor Pervin, seconded by Councillor Farinelli. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Mr Hammond. We move now on to general business. Councillors, any general business items? Councillor Chewy.
Yes, through you, Mr Mayor. I would just like to take time to congratulate all our Australian Day Award nominees and winners, and the team that worked so hard to make the event the success it was. We had, I believe, over 300 people in the room. I think everybody was pleased with the way it went, and some felt it could have been longer. Personally, I thought it was good because it gave opportunity for people to go to other events if they felt they wanted to do so. So congratulations to Kath and Kim and the team. Also, to the pool parties. I believe that they were very successful in the 4 areas. So I think that's a great initiative, and we're hoping that maybe we can continue to do that in the future. So a shout out to everybody involved in all of that, and thank you again. Congratulations to the award winners and nominees. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chewy. Councillor Millwood.
Through the chair, I'd also like to say that thank you for that, Councillor Chewy, that I also received a lot of very nice comments about the way that the Australia Day proceedings went and how good it was. Yep, thank you.
Okay, any further comments or general business items? Councillor, Mr CEO.
Haven't been elevated to the lofty ranks of councillor, Mr. Mayor, nor would I be qualified, I suspect. Through you, Mr. Chairman, at first, please forgive me, Mayor and councillors, for my absences through the morning. It's not my usual practice, but I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. And equally, please forgive me for the telephone gaffe. I understand the penalty for that sin and will pay my penance accordingly. Through you, Mr. Chairman, the reason that I was out of the room is that I've been called to conversations with people from both the state and the federal government pursuing robustly a solution for the Port Hinchinbrook dilemma. So it's actually still happening in accordance with Council's instruction to me as we speak. Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. And the material which I have, which is confidential at this point in time, really needs to be considered carefully and full information provided to all of the councillors before the next meeting. So in respect of council's earlier resolution, I believe that my recommendation was that the matter be deferred until later in this meeting or at another time. So I strongly recommend that the latter part of that resolution be applied and we can get full and accurate information before council so it can reasonably consider the changes which are will be before us.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. I concur. The phone call from the state and notes there from the federal government confirm that both levels of government have heard our concerns and viewed the agenda item before us today. So would somebody move that we defer this matter for further consideration? Councillor Farinelli, seconded by Councillor Barnes. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. So that item is now being deferred, item 3.1. Are there any further general business items? If not, somebody move that we go. Pardon?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, Councillor Pervin needs to declare his interest and...
I'll be leaving the meeting from this point.
It's been moved that we go into committee by Councillor Farinelli, seconded by Councillor Baines. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, councillors, would somebody move that we move out of committee? Moved by Councillor Baines, seconded by Councillor Barnes. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Over to you, Ms Bradley.
Thank you. As a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, the Cassowary Coast region's community, businesses and industries have been impacted in various ways due to the pandemic. The report details the review of the impact and the current financial relief provided under our COVID-19 financial hardship policy, which is designed to reduce the financial burden to businesses and the community during this pandemic. It's recommended that Council adopt the revised COVID-19 financial hardship policy, which would be effective up until the 30th of June 2021. And note that there is an inclusion of an end date of the 31st of March 2021 for applications to be received for the sewerage charge concession for business owners for the July to December 2020 rating period only.
Thank you, Ms Bradley. Any questions, councillors? I'd just like to Councillor Farinelli. I'd just like to compliment the Finance Department. In a year where we had COVID, we had financial assistance package, we had the lowest general rate increase in 12 years since amalgamation. We didn't lay off any of our employees, so we absorbed a bit of a hit there, but we did the right thing in terms of protecting our employees and their job security. And the feedback from the community has been very, very positive about the hardship policy. Fine example was Innisfail senior citizens. The President grabbed the microphone at the function and got up and congratulated Council for the low rate increase in general terms, and they applied for the concession and they were successful. So their club of volunteers benefited from that policy. So on behalf of Council, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yep. All right. Got the report and the recommendation. Somebody move the recommendation. Councillor Farinelli, seconded by Councillor Millwood. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you all.
And that draws our meeting to a close at 10 past 10. Thank you.